Chapter 4 The Golden Age. As he walked down to the temple in the cool of the morning, Saul passed along streets lined with shops. Dates and figs, oranges and olives were there, colored cloths and silks, sandals and shoes. The letter writer sat in his shaded corner. Donkeys tripped by, bearing skins full of water. These things would not hold Saul, nor make him loiter. They were not so strange to a boy from Roman Tarsus, with its busy market, as they were to the peasant boys from villages like Nazareth, or even to the fisher youths from Bethsaida and Capernaum on the shores of the Lake of Galilee. Nor would the dark green of the olives on the grey mount across the brook Kidron and the light green of the new shoots of the vines that made such a bright freshness on the old earth draw him out into the country round about Jerusalem, for he was a city boy. Saul's heart and soul and all his senses were fascinated by the life of that wonderful building which was the centre of the world to him — his school and college and cathedral, his Rugby, his Oxford, his Westminster Abbey in one — the Temple. Out of the stored up words that he had learned by heart, whole songs would come rushing in on his memory, like the one beginning, "I was glad when they said unto me, Let us go unto the house of the Lord. Our feet are standing within thy gates, O Jerusalem." As he threaded his way through the crowds, jostled by togaed Romans and sandalled Greeks, scanned by copper-featured men from Egypt and bronzed travellers from the island of Crete, passing mysterious, silent Arabs and slow-paced travellers from across the Euphrates, meeting men from Asia Minor, from the Pamphylian coast and the high tableland of Phrygia, he would remember the great preacher who foretold, "Many nations shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God of Israel. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." Many nations. Here they were threading their way to and fro in these very streets. But suddenly, when he had crossed the outer pavement and gone toward the marble steps, he saw before him a slab of stone, and in it were cut in bold Greek letters which he could read: "Let no foreigner enter within the screen and enclosure surrounding the sanctuary. Whosoever is taken so doing will himself be the cause that death overtaketh him." Many nations shall go to the house of the God of Israel, the word had said. But here was a notice forbidding the nations to enter, threatening death to any foreigner who did so. Saul would remember that only the Jews, or the men of other nations who had become what are called proselyte Jews by being circumcised, might come in here. All other men were exiles forever from the central place where the Jews believed God was dwelling. So Saul, the young Pharisee, proudly passed the stone of forbidding, and went up the steps into the outer court. He crossed the cool pavement which the sun had not yet warmed, passed between the pillars, under a gateway with gates of gold and silver, into the inner court of the men. A wavering column of smoke lifted slowly from the fire that burned perpetually on the altar of unhewn stone, and behind and beyond the smoke, up more steps, was the holy place, behind which was hidden the Holy of Holies. A shining golden roof was there, borne on pure marble pillars, and the sacred curtain over the golden door hid the holy place itself from his wondering, awe-struck gaze. Turning to the side, Saul would see, under the cool blue shadows of the cloisters, groups gathered round teachers, some arguing, others listening, while a white-bearded sage with dreaming eyes expounded the law and the prophets. Finding the place where Gamaliel sat, he would naturally go there. Leaning against one of the pillars, he could rest his hot cheek against the cool marble, and listen to the teaching of the finest Pharisee of his day. "The mind of the student must be like a cistern lined with cement. It must hold every drop of knowledge that enters in, losing nothing," said Gamaliel. Saul already knew that the water in Jerusalem was stored in enormous cisterns when the rains fell, and that the people would die of thirst if the cisterns were to break or leak. The ideal of the student, said his teacher, was to hold the pure water of the wisdom of the past. That was the strength and the weakness of the teaching of the Jewish schooling. The Jew could hold ideas like a cistern. He was able to remember the old, but rarely to make new ideas. When he argued it was usually by hurling quotations at his opponent, and not, as a Greek would argue, by a closely reasoned line of fresh thought. The great teachers of the Jews were men like Gamaliel, who said, "Thus spoke Moses," not original thinkers like Plato and Aristotle. But if they could not reason wonderful philosophies, they could see marvelous visions of the future, more beautiful than anything we have ever yet reached in practice, of a time when men would beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. The Pharisees' great aim was to know and obey all the law. For they believed that, if one man obeyed the whole law for a whole day, the Messiah who was to bring in the golden age of freedom and peace would arrive. So they laid down all sorts of astonishing details as to exactly how the Jew should wash and keep the Sabbath, with endless arguments as to what was work and what was not. This was called the spoken law, or Torah, to distinguish it from the written law of Moses. Just as he had seen students writing with an ivory style on a wax tablet, so Saul wrote on his memory the weary details of the law. "You may lean a ladder from one window of a dovecote to another on the Sabbath," Saul would hear, "but you may not move the foot of it. You may tap the ground with your foot, but not rub your sandal along the earth, for that would be plowing. You must not pluck an ear of corn or rub the corn out of it with your hands, for you would be guilty of reaping and threshing, nor must you light a fire on the Sabbath." He learned how to stand and how to bow when praying, how to wash his hands, how many steps he might walk on the Sabbath, and 1,000 other things. Yet Gamaliel, his master, was a man who loved the richer thoughts from the great teachers of the past. Sometimes, like a great light in a dark place, one of these beautiful words would come out and Saul's whole spirit would leap up when he heard Gamaliel say, "Thus says Hillel, what is hateful to yourself do not to your fellow men. This is the whole law. The rest is only explanation. Go, study." Starting out from the temple in the evening, Saul would pass by the Roman citadel. "Quo vadis?" the challenge from the man on the sentry go to a skulking figure at the garrison gate, the clank of sword and buckler, the rattle of chains of the cavalry horses and the stamp of their restless hoofs in the stables, the flare of a torch, all would startle the brooding student out of his thoughts of the law. The Roman citadel loomed above him. Silhouetted against the sky was the high watchtower. Antony's tower they called it, he would remember, after Mark Antony, the Roman ruler, who entertained Cleopatra years ago at Tarsus. Rome. The word would send a strangely mingled feeling through him. Saul was a Roman citizen, but his swift arteries pulsed with the passionate blood of a Jew. Rome had made the throne of this young student's great forefather and namesake, Saul, an empty thing. Here in Jerusalem, where David once led his soldiers out over the hills to destroy the enemies of his people, Rome now ruled with sword and lash and cross. The judgment seat, where Solomon once sat to give his decrees, was now filled by a proud Roman, who cared mainly for his chances of promotion from Rome and his bribes from the rich in Jerusalem. If they dared to lift a hand to strike for freedom, the Jews were crucified. So Saul had learned in the evenings when the students got together and talked the gossip of the city. Saul's heart thumped with anger within him as he went through the streets in the evening. Yet Saul the Jew was also Paul the Roman citizen. In the morning, as he went down again to the temple, he would feel that he would give his very life to bring in the new age when the Messiah would rule in the city of David again. Would there ever be a king of the Jews in Jerusalem? Then, as he sat at the feet of Gamaliel for the morning lesson, he would look up with a startled joy as he heard the old man's voice shaking with the same longing that he himself felt. From the tremulous lips of the teacher would come the lava of the volcanic fires of patriotism in the words of the song of the Golden Age and of the coming of the new king, written over 100 years before by a fervid Pharisee. The words focused all the burning rays of Saul's desire till they scorched the very soul of the student. "O Lord, raise up for them their king, the son of David. He shall bring glory to the Lord, in a place which all the world shall see. He shall sweep clean Jerusalem and make it holy as it was in the olden days. A just king and taught by God is he who will reign. There shall be no wrong in his days among them, for all shall be holy. Their king is the Lord Messiah." As he heard the words, Saul would see with the keen vision of his mind's eye a young valiant prince, coming up over the hills at the head of a glittering army, sweeping the Romans out of the city and the land, and himself ruling, not only over Jerusalem, but the whole earth. Immortal words that Saul had learned would ring in his head. There was given him power and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom shall not be destroyed. The Song of the Golden Age had been written 100 years before Saul was in Jerusalem. Yet in all that century the fighting prince had not arrived. Would he ever come? "When will he come?" the young students would ask Gamaliel. "What will he be like?" "He may come at any day, at any hour. He will come when the need is greatest, and great is the need now. He will be of the tribe of Judah, a son of David. He will be born, he may already have been born, in Bethlehem or Jerusalem. He will lead an army. Be prepared. Beware of the false messiahs who are leading the people astray. Watch, for the conquering king will certainly come." In such words as these Gamaliel would tell his students of the golden age that was to be, and the prince who even then might be preparing his army. What a harsh, contemptuous laugh would have broken out in that group of law students in the temple if someone could have told them the truth which no one then knew, that the conquering prince was already in their country, that in a village among the hills, 3 days' journey northward, he was in a carpenter's shop making yokes for oxen. Yet, even as Saul and his fellow students walked from the temple in the afternoon talking of the coming king, the young village carpenter, Jesus, shook the sweet-scented shavings and sawdust from his tunic, and, pulling his girdle tighter as he gave a smiling word to his mother, walked out of the shade of the cool workshop into the sunny street, and climbed the glorious hills that girdle quiet Nazareth. End of chapter 4.